What if a single man, dead before his 33rd birthday, could reshape the entire known world? This is the story of Alexander the Great, a boy born into a small mountain kingdom who would carve an empire stretching from Greece to India. Our story begins in 356 BC in the kingdom of Macedon, a rugged land on the edge of the Greek world. There, a son was born to King Philip II and his fierce, ambitious queen, Olympias, and they named him Alexander. Olympias believed her son was destined for greatness beyond mortal men, filling his childhood with stories of gods and heroes. Philip, meanwhile, was a brilliant warrior king who had built Macedon into a rising military power, and he expected his son to inherit that strength. Growing up caught between these two powerful, often clashing parents, young Alexander developed a burning need to prove himself, to be greater than even his father. That hunger would define every choice he made for the rest of his life. To sharpen that brilliant but restless mind, Philip brought in the finest teacher he could find, Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers in Greek history. For years, Aristotle tutored the young prince in science, medicine, poetry, and the art of reasoning itself. Aristotle gave Alexander a lifelong love of learning and a deep admiration for Greek culture, something he would carry all the way to Asia. But books alone would never satisfy him. Alexander wanted glory on the battlefield, not just in the library. Around this time, a magnificent but untamable black stallion was brought before King Philip, a horse so wild that no rider could mount it. This was Bucephalus, and every experienced horseman in the court had already given up on him. Young Alexander noticed something the others missed. The horse was simply afraid of its own shadow. Calmly turning Bucephalus toward the sun, he mounted him with ease, and in that single moment won not only a magnificent warhorse, but his father's stunned respect. Bucephalus would become far more than a horse. He was Alexander's companion through every campaign to come, carrying him across deserts, rivers, and battlefields for the next 2 decades. And around this same time, Alexander formed another bond that would last just as long. That bond was with Hephaestion, a young Macedonian nobleman who became Alexander's closest friend and eventually his most trusted general. Where Alexander was fire and ambition, Hephaestion was steady loyalty, the one person Alexander never had to prove himself to. By age 16, Alexander was already commanding troops for his father. At 18, at the brutal Battle of Chaeronea, he led the decisive cavalry charge that crushed the combined armies of Athens and Thebes, securing Macedon's dominance over all of Greece. It was a stunning debut for a teenager, and it proved Alexander was no ordinary prince. He was a natural commander. But his rise would soon be tested by tragedy no one saw coming. In 336 BC, at his own daughter's wedding celebration, King Philip was suddenly assassinated by one of his own bodyguards. The Macedonian court was thrown into chaos, and rivals began circling, waiting to see who would seize the throne. Alexander moved fast and ruthlessly, eliminating rival claimants and securing the loyalty of the army almost overnight. At just 20 years old, he was now king of Macedon, but a kingdom of enemies surrounded him on every side. Several Greek city-states, sensing weakness in this untested young king, rebelled almost immediately. Alexander answered with terrifying speed and force, marching south and crushing the rebellion before anyone even realized he was coming. With Greece finally silenced and unified under his command, Alexander turned his eyes toward a far greater ambition, one his father had dreamed of but never lived to attempt. He would invade the mighty Persian Empire, the largest and richest power on Earth. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed into Asia with roughly 40,000 soldiers, a force that seemed almost laughably small compared to the vast Persian Empire he was about to challenge. Standing against him was Darius III, King of Kings, ruler of an empire spanning millions of people. Alexander's first true test against Darius came at Issus, on a narrow coastal plain where the huge Persian numbers couldn't fully spread out. Alexander exploited this brilliantly, personally leading a cavalry charge straight toward Darius himself. Terrified, Darius fled the field, abandoning his own army, his treasure, and even his family. It was a humiliating defeat for the Persian king, and proof to the entire world that this young Macedonian was no passing threat. Rather than chasing Darius immediately, Alexander turned south along the coast, securing ports and cities so the powerful Persian navy would have nowhere left to dock. Along the way, he passed through the ancient city of Gordium, where legend told of an impossible puzzle. An old prophecy claimed that whoever untied the fabled Gordian knot would become ruler of all Asia. Rather than struggling with the tangled cords like everyone before him, Alexander simply drew his sword and cut it in a single stroke. It was a bold, symbolic act, a message to his own men and to the world that Alexander didn't play by ordinary rules. Whether it was destiny or sheer audacity, the moment cemented his growing legend across the ancient world. Alexander then pressed on into Egypt, where the people, long resentful of Persian rule, welcomed him as a liberator rather than a conqueror. There, he journeyed deep into the desert to consult the oracle at the remote Siwa oasis. According to legend, the oracle's priests greeted him as the son of a god, a claim Alexander never publicly denied. From that point on, whispers spread through his army that their king was more than a mortal man. With Egypt secured, Alexander marched east once more to finally settle things with Darius. The two kings would meet again on a vast open plain near Gaugamela, and this time, Darius had gathered an army of staggering size to crush him for good. Darius had scythed chariots, war elephants, and hundreds of thousands of men, vastly outnumbering Alexander's forces. Everything now hinged on this single battle. If Alexander lost here, his entire campaign, and likely his life, would be over. The final gamble. Alexander spotted a gap opening in the Persian lines and, without hesitation, drove his cavalry straight through it toward Darius's own position. Once again, the Persian king panicked under the pressure and fled the battlefield. And once his soldiers saw their king running, the entire massive army collapsed into chaos. Gaugamela was the decisive blow. With this victory, Alexander effectively shattered the Persian Empire, and soon after, Darius was betrayed and killed by his own remaining nobles, who hoped to save themselves by ending their fallen king's reign. When Alexander found Darius's body, he treated it with unexpected respect, giving his fallen rival a royal funeral. In his mind, he wasn't just conquering Persia, he was becoming its rightful king, and he wanted the Persian people to see him that way too. Alexander marched on to claim Babylon and the other great Persian capitals, taking their legendary treasuries and thrones. He began adopting Persian customs and dress, hoping to unite Macedonians and Persians as one people under his rule. Not everyone back home approved. Many of his own Macedonian soldiers and generals grumbled that their king was losing himself to foreign customs, but Alexander pressed forward anyway. His ambition, it seemed, had no ceiling. He wanted to see the very edge of the world. So the army marched on for years, deep into Central Asia, and finally into India, further than any Greek army had ever gone. There, along the banks of the Hydaspes River, Alexander faced perhaps his toughest opponent yet, the Indian king Porus, whose army included a wall of massive war elephants. In brutal monsoon rain, Alexander's forces crossed the river and fought one of the hardest battles of the entire campaign. Though it cost him dearly, he won again. And afterward, impressed by Porus's courage, he chose to let the defeated king keep his own throne as a loyal ally instead of executing him. But after 8 grueling years of non-stop campaigning, Alexander's own soldiers had finally reached their limit. Exhausted, homesick, and having marched over 10,000 miles from Macedon, his army refused to go any further east. For the first time in his life, Alexander was forced to back down. Furious, but out of options, he agreed to turn the army back toward home. Though home, for a man who had never stopped conquering, would prove to be a bitter word. The return journey turned into a nightmare of its own. Choosing to march part of his army through the Gedrosian desert, Alexander lost thousands of soldiers and countless camp followers to heat, thirst, and starvation, one of the costliest mistakes of his entire career. Finally, battered and diminished, the army made it back to the heart of the empire, settling in the great city of Babylon. Alexander began planning new campaigns and grand building projects, seemingly unable to imagine a life that wasn't in motion. But tragedy struck close to home first. Hephaestion, his lifelong friend, most trusted general, and closest companion since childhood, suddenly fell ill and died. And Alexander was utterly devastated, reportedly refusing to eat or speak for days. Some said Alexander was never truly the same after losing Hephaestion. The man who had conquered half the known world now seemed haunted by something even he couldn't defeat: grief, and perhaps the first real sense of his own mortality. Just months later, in June of 323 BC, Alexander himself fell violently ill after a night of feasting in Babylon. Fever gripped him for nearly 2 weeks, and his condition grew worse with each passing day, leaving his generals desperate and afraid. Historians still debate the true cause: malaria, poison, typhoid, or simple exhaustion after years of wounds and relentless campaigning. Whatever the cause, the man who had never lost a single battle was now losing the only fight that mattered. He never named an heir. When his generals begged to know who should inherit his vast empire, Alexander reportedly whispered only that it should go to the strongest. On June the 11th, 323 BC, Alexander the Great died in Babylon at just 32 years old. His vague, final words proved tragically fitting. With no clear heir, Alexander's closest generals, men like Ptolemy and others who had fought at his side for years, tore his empire apart in decades of brutal wars, carving it into rival kingdoms across Egypt, Persia, and Greece. And yet, even torn apart, his legacy endured in ways no battle ever could. Wherever Alexander had marched, Greek language, art, and ideas took root, blending with local cultures to create an entirely new age historians call the Hellenistic world. Alexander was, in the end, a paradox, a brilliant strategist and a reckless dreamer, a devoted friend and a ruthless conqueror, a boy who wanted to prove himself to his father and became something far greater than either of them ever imagined. More than 2,000 years later, his name still echoes through history books, military academies, and legends across 3 continents. Alexander the Great never saw the edges of the world he set out to conquer. But in the story he left behind, in many ways, he never really stopped.